for you guys to make sure you stay the whole time.
Yeah, treats. That's good, huh? All right, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I really love this topic. Can you guys hear me in the back? Or do you want me to use the microphone? Is it okay? Got acoustics? I see one yes. You good? Okay. All right. So if that changes, just let me know. Hopefully I'll have something worthwhile for you here. It's a whole semester trying to figure out what to draw into 40 minutes. I picked some stuff on carbohydrates, proteins, and fluid if we get there. I don't know if we'll make it all the way. What you have is not my whole presentation, or it's going to be really short, right? There's only 9 slides there. But I picked the ones I felt like were most pertinent, all right, that I thought maybe you might want to hang on to. Now, from an exercise standpoint, most people aren't going to need the stuff we talk about today. Most people that just casually exercise to keep fit, really my plate, basic balance, good nutrition is going to be fine. When you start looking for the edge, when you start ratcheting up the intensity, the duration, then there's some tricks that become, I think, impertinent to either push yourself harder, get your time faster, be a better competitor, whatever you're after. And that's where I wanted to go today, is those are the things, not just general nutrition, but really those principles that I think are more pertinent when you're trying to get the edge or when the intensity and duration get up there a ways. Okay, so just keep that in mind to make sure we balance those in the right perspective, all right? Okay, so that's my plate. Now, this is what I'm talking about. If you guys remember Michael Phelps' finish at the 2008 Beijing, his butterfly, 100-meter butterfly. Some of you nodded. And it was like, well, look at the time, 0.01, a hundredth of a second, and it was even closer than that. This is where I'm talking about nutrition can make an edge here. It's becoming more prominent in athletics, I think, because of they're looking for anything they can do to get that little edge. You look at finishing times between first and fourth here. This 100-meter dash, again, the Olympics, Athens 2004. Between getting a medal or getting a gold medal and getting nothing, what was 4/100ths of a second? So athletes are becoming more interested in anything they can do to get that little edge. Now, nutrition is one of those. Thinking about this practically, though, are you going to drink a Gatorade while you're running a 100-meter dash? No, it's not going to help, right? And it's not practical anyways. So in this scenario, nutrition during doesn't make any difference. It's not the point. But what they did in training the last year and how they fueled themselves during their training to maximize their performance would. That makes sense? Now, before we get going, I gave you those sheets. All the recommendations they target is always in kilograms. I don't know where we ended up in without using the metric system, but everything I'm going to give you is in kilograms. So if you haven't ever done that conversion, it does do it. Do it. All right. On the paper. Oh, you're used to it. You know, you grew up in the metric system. So take your weight in pounds and divide by 2.2, and that's going to give you your weight in kilograms. If you have a phone, if you have whatever, pull it out and whip out your weight. And there's a little spot for you to write it down if you want to have that. But some of you have done this, and I see a lot of familiar faces. So a lot of you, this is going to be old hat for you. But get your weight in kilograms, and then everything we talk about today will be driven by that weight. And do feel free to ask questions too, by the way. I mean, I'm happy. I like that. It's nice if something piques your interest and you want to have a little diversion for a second. That's just fine. Okay, so your weight in pounds divided by 2.2 is going to give you your weight in kilograms. So it's going to be something less, right? More than half of your current weight by pounds. So if you weigh 220 pounds, your weight in kilograms is going to be 100. I just picked that because it was easy, right? 220 divided by 2.2. All right? Now, okay, so from a carbohydrate standpoint, Brother Kimple, we were talking today, and he gave me a good idea to explain, if you have a background in glycogen, a lot of what we talk about in carbohydrates the purpose of it is to help athletes maintain glycogen stores. And we were talking about it, and he had mentioned, in the perspective of like a piece of fruit or a potato, the plant kingdom is pretty smart. The plant kingdom knows that often it needs to store a source of carbohydrate for the seed or whatever is growing to give it fuel when it's needed. We're kind of the same way, or when we eat the plant, kind of the same thing happens. It comes into us, the sugars are made available, and we put a little bit into storage in our muscle and in our liver. That becomes available during activity and is really pertinent for high-intense activities. We don't have a lot, but we have some. Usually an activity, 1 to 2 hours is kind of the time frame they give. So we've got enough sugar hanging around in there that can help keep us going for that time frame. If that goes down, bad stuff happens, and that's a possibility with those women in that video, is when carbohydrate stores are low, then things don't work right anymore. They're pertinent for intense activity. Right, now these are the recommendations for carbohydrate based on your kilograms. For very light training, they say about 3 to 5. And actually, most of us, your average American, eat about 3 or 5 grams of carbohydrate a day. That's pretty typical. So that's no different. Moderate intense training, like 60 minutes a day at moderate intensity, they go to 5 to 7. Moderate to high intensity exercise, 1 to 3 hours a day, 7 to 10. And then when you're hitting the 4 to 5 hours a day, very intense type exercise, they go at 8 to 12 or even above that. Level as far as carbohydrate. You get some of these guys that run the ultra marathons that are running 500-mile races that are 5 days long. You know, those guys are hitting up to 15, 17 potentially grams of carbohydrate a day. Now, the hard part of this is, what does this look like? And we'll look at that in a second. This is broken down a little bit better. Let me give you an example. Golf is a great sport, but it is the same thing as being on the soccer field for an hour and a half. You're not going to have the same recommendation, right? It's more of a skill sport. And so you look at golf, they said, okay, just normal dietary intake, 3 to 5 grams per kilogram. But then you look at a cycler, 7 to 12 grams per kilogram. So you got somebody riding the Tour de France, you know, they're looking to train at, you know, potentially 10 grams per kilogram carbohydrate. All right, now the purpose of that is to avoid this. You don't want to get caught in this if you're in this kind of scenario, is if this is your carbohydrate stores, you don't want to go out and push real hard, get them part back. Next day, push real hard, get them part back. By the end of the week, you're feeling pretty crummy. These recommendations are trying to maintain something more like that, where you go out, they go down, you get them back. And so during the week, you can maintain the best stores you can to maintain the best training you can. And so when you get to the event, you're okay. Is that good? Make sense? All right. So try it out. Here's Lucas. He's a 20-year-old cross-country runner, runs 80 miles per week, a couple hours of practice most days of the week. He weighs 138 pounds. Run his carbohydrate recommendations, and then we'll look at what that looks like in food. So use what I gave you. Use on that first slide the recommendations, finds the gram per kilogram, convert his weight to kilograms, and then estimate how much you think he needs per day. Wow. Yeah, pretty close. Yeah, I'm going to hit around 500, but yeah, you're fast. That's yeah, and there'll be variability because we all may select a little different. There's a little bit more of an art than a science here sometimes. It's using your judgment in the situation to figure out how much they need. What are some other numbers? Throw them out. Everybody too scared to throw out their number? 450? All right, come on, a few more. Zach, what'd you get? You're doing in class too much, right? Anybody else? Who else can I pick on that I know? Anybody else get it out there? Oh, 500, okay, all right. All right, so 450, 500. That's, when I went with 8 grams per kilogram, I got about 500. So kilograms, 62.7, times by 8 grams per kilogram, about 500 grams carbohydrate. Now, let's take a look at what that looks like. This is about 500 grams of carbohydrate. For breakfast, you had a yogurt smoothie with a cup of yogurt, half a cup of frozen sweet strawberries, a couple tablespoons of honey, half a cup of skim milk, 2 large vegetarian burritos, that's 2 of the 12-inch flour tortillas with beans, cheese, rice, peppers, guacamole, During training, 16 ounces of a 6% carbohydrate drink, turkey sandwich at 7 p.m. with sourdough bread, which is bigger bread, turkey, mayo, mustard, apple, a couple fig Newtons, 1 cup non-filled milk, 2 slices of pepperoni pizza, and 16 ounces of non-caffeinated soda. Yeah, that's 500 grams of carbohydrate. So again, we're looking at people that are burning some pretty serious calories here.
On the backside, what is the carbohydrate drink?
That's a fancy term for Gator. Is that kind of settle okay? All right, now, I think most would understand that any athlete that's training doesn't have the same intensity every day. You go on ups and downs, so one meal plan is not going to work across the board. Does that make sense? I had a chance to go listen to some dietitians that work at the Olympic Training Center in Denver. It was really fun. They're really good, and they shared their tools with me. And What they do to keep it simple, because often people aren't going to, a lot of athletes aren't really interested in cranking out gram per kilogram recommendations, right? And so they come in and say, tell me what to do. And so she pulls out these simple visuals, and this is what she does. She says, if it's an easy training day, this is how your plate will look. Cut it down the middle, more fruits and veggies, your carbohydrates right here. If you're trying to lose weight, we trim those a little bit, keep your protein constant. If it's a medium training day, all right, this area grows because this provides what? What type of energy? Yeah, it's where the glycogen stores are a lot of that's going to come from. This is carbohydrate, right? So that grows, this shrinks a little bit, protein stays constant. On a high training day, hard training day, now that really balloons open. We're really pushing carbohydrates to keep those glycogen stores up. Protein stays constant, and the fruits and veggies down a little bit. So she uses that visual to help them kind of adjust their meal plan. Now, if you're working with, she did a lot of weight athletes, but if you're working with a 350-pound lineman, are they only going to eat one plate? Yeah, no, they're going to have multiple plates, but every plate ought to be still proportioned like that. Does that make sense? So you can kind of take calories into that perspective as well. So that's kind of a nice, friendly tool. And she actually told me I could share as long as I credited the Olympic Training Center on that, so there's a disclaimer down there. And she probably wouldn't, my impression I got is she wouldn't mind if somebody was interested in those tools too. I can share those, so just so you know. Yeah, it's kind of cool. They were really great. Okay, now let's talk about pregame. So that's during regular training. Now, right before the event, again, the carbohydrates are our focus usually, and the idea here is topping off the gas tank, trying to get the gas tank full before you go. Now, this example we just used, Marcus, the cross-country runner, how far does a cross-country runner run usually?
5 miles.
Yeah, like 5K. Is his gas tank going to empty? No, so we really wouldn't worry so much about a pre-game here. This is only if you're going to run the gas tank down. So 1 to 2 hours of hard exercise or more, then we start looking at pre-event is going to help maintain that gas tank as best we can. Does that make sense, hopefully? So this is the basic recommendations right here. Depending how far you are out, if you're an hour out from exercise, they recommend less, about 1 gram per kilogram. If you're 4 hours out, they recommend about 4, and you see how that works. It's kind of handy to remember, is it's based on. Now, don't confuse this. I always tell my class, because this happens every semester, is this doesn't mean at 4 hours out start eating 4 grams, and at 3 hours eat 3 grams, and at 2 hours eat 2 grams, and you're going to be dead, all right? You're not going to be able to move, let alone compete, right? So it's just saying where you are, then pick that recommendation range. Closer you get, the softer, more liquidy type of stuff, anything that's going to be easier on the stomach. Now the problem with this, let me show you what this looks like again. A lot of folks say, well, anyways, let me show you what it looks like. Okay, this is 2 grams per kilogram. This is right in the middle. All right, this is 2 cups of pasta. So that's 1 cup of pasta. So double that. So put that in your plate twice. Okay, a slice of toast on top of that. 12 ounces of chocolate milk, which is more than that. That's only 8 ounces there. 1 large banana. And 3/4 cup of broccoli. This is 1/3, so put that in your plate 3 times. Is that a fair amount of food before you went to run a marathon? That's part of it. If you can handle it, this is really great. But a lot of people can't do this, and a lot of them will say, this is only half of the 4, so double that for 4 grams per kilogram. The practicality of this, Michael Phelps can do this. But the practicality of this for a lot of people is over the top. So they say do what you can, just understand getting good carbohydrate before is a good idea. And so they usually will cut this at, around here, say this is a good goal wherever you're at. If you're capable of more, great, but this is a good goal. But go with what you can do, right? What's comfortable for you. Practice it, right, before you go. All right, so that's pre. So we got overall, pre. Questions on that? Yeah.
So when is the least amount of time that you should eat before, like, a workout? Is there a certain amount of time that it's just a really bad idea for you to eat after that? Or
There's some kind of hesitation about eating within. Right before is probably fine, but that like 15 minutes to 45 minutes, some are saying steer away from that, and it has to do with insulin response and being peaked when you start activity. Some are saying maybe that's not the best time to start. It's really, I think, a little controversial. I think that's probably a wise idea, but if you try it and you're fine with it, then I don't see any other reason not to. It kind of depends on whether you get cramps and all that kind of stuff with it, but usually they'll say an hour out is probably where the minimal you want to start, and then maybe something right before. Any others? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the, excuse me, the different types of carbohydrates. Are you assuming a high glycemic index or a medium or a low glycemic index carbohydrate?
Good call. Typically, the before they go with more of a low glycemic is kind of what they push. So that 1 to 4 hours out, probably a lower glycemic would be a good choice, yeah. And then when you get in the race, they go more high when you do high, yep. Yeah. Any others? Yeah. All right. Okay. Now, during is really interesting, I think. This is the base recommendation during. And again, this is if you're running a 5K, you probably don't need to worry so much about during. This is, again, if you're an hour or more, they say taking carbohydrate during. Bottom line is the bottom there. Athletes can exercise longer and sprint harder at the end of exercise if they've consumed carbohydrate during the event. So it'll help push at the end if you have a little bit of carbohydrate. The standard recommendation is about 30 to 60 grams per hour. We'll kind of show you what that looks like in a minute. Some of the research in the past, what that infers is that's all you can absorb was what the indication was. Is while you're exercising, your blood kind of moves away from down here, goes to your muscle, and so your capacity to absorb gets a little less. Your body doesn't handle things as well. And if you push it too hard, you're going to make yourself sick because stuff will just hang around in there. But let me show you this guy, Oscar Eukendrup, has done some really great research. And if you can follow this, this is kind of cool what he did. Don't pay attention too much to the numbers, just the trends here. He took some athletes and started shoving glucose down them, which is just one sugar, just the sugar glucose. And when he did that, he got a certain amount of uptake and use. When he increased the amount, so this was 1.2 grams per minute, and then he upped that to 1.8, it didn't change. In other words, you didn't get any more in the body. You couldn't get any more in there. But when he took sugars and started combining them, he found that he could get a better oxidation rate. In other words, you could get more fuel to the muscle when you started mixing carbohydrates together. And there's a really cool principle there. Novel, it was kind of some cool research, is that you just access more. It's kind of like being in a line at Disneyland. If they only have one line open, you can only go in there so fast. If they open 2 lines open and have 2 different cars going, you go through a lot quicker. And the sugars use different transport systems. And so Eukendrup noticed that if you put them together, you can get more in the body while you're exercising. And don't let them fool you. They're not the only ones that know this. Every sports drink designs it that way pretty much, and most food comes that way naturally. So what we might look for is maybe what's the optimal balance? How much glucose to fructose? What's the perfect balance to optimize? And I think they're still working on that. A lot of them go 2 parts glucose to 1 part fructose is something that you hear a lot. So if you're looking at stuff, that may be something to look at in the label, is if they have both sugars, then you know that you're going to get access to both of those. And if you do that, what he said is you can use more sugar than that during activity. So with that in mind, these numbers actually are low compared to what people can tolerate. Eukendrup showed you could put in about 1.7 grams per minute, which works out to almost 100 grams of carbohydrate instead of the 30 to 60. Most of the time you don't need that unless you're really in some long endurance activities. But you take Chrissy Wellington again. She's the one that's this woman that's won this Ironman so many times in a row. Eukendrup had some good data on her, and she eats about 86 grams of carbohydrate every hour during that 9-hour race. And what he found was when he cataloged this is a correlation line like that. In other words, as runners like this ate more carbohydrate, their times went down. So in other words, winners usually did more carbohydrate. So it seems to be a pretty good recommendation. Now, there's the summary, and you have that slide on your paper. So exercise less than 45 minutes, probably not necessary. High intensity exercise, 45 to 75, small amounts. Endurance activities, intermittent high intensity, which would be like soccer, basketball, those kind of things, lasting 1 to 2.5 hours, 30 to 60, and these long endurance activities, 80 to 90 grams of carbohydrate or maybe more during activity. All right, questions on that? Anything so far? I'm kind of moving fast just to kind of get through some of this so you have kind of a baseline. All right. Now, if you want to look at that at real food, and I don't know if you call this real food actually, a lot of these supplements, but Gatorade, about 12 ounces of Gatorade has about 28 grams of carbohydrate. 24 ounces of Gatorade and these Cliff Shot blocks. I don't know if I have any of those. I had some extra stuff laying around, so. Yeah, they're kind of like the Goo Chomps. They're just little gummy bear type things. Oh yeah, they're right there. Silly me. The shot blocks right there. And then if you're looking more for the 86, it'd be a Gatorade, a banana, Cliff shot blocks. And so she's eating about that much every hour while she's running, which is really quite amazing, actually, to be able to do that. If you want to go more whole foods, you can eat fig Newtons. I don't know if that's the healthiest choice either, but you got some blueberries, some bananas down here, a Gatorade, banana, dried blueberries. You can get about 86 grams of carbohydrate there as well. I don't know, does anybody have anything they really like to eat while they're exercising that works well for them? I don't know if we have any.
While exercising, you mean?
Yeah, while exercising. Yeah.
Granola bars.
Granola bars?
Yeah.
Are you a runner, biker?
I do a lot of running, a lot of push-ups, a lot of weights.
Does it work for you okay while you're running?
Yeah.
You like to chew on them? Okay, granola bars. I need to get rid of some of these. There you go. Oh, sorry. Heads up, by the way. Sorry about that. Yeah. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I found that gives me good energy is paydays. I like eating
Paydays?
paydays. Yeah. They have a lot of peanuts in them.
Oh, payday candy bars, huh? Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah, everybody's got their own little things they like. Here, you better get one. You can have a tiger's milk. I had a bunch of these left over from my sports class, so I thought I'd get rid of them today. Anybody else? Now you see I'm giving out treats? Yeah.
I like coconut water.
Oh, coconut water. That's become pretty popular. That's an interesting discussion on the coconut water, too. All right. How about a Power Bar Performance Energy Gel? There you go. All right. I got a few more up here. We'll save them for later. Okay. Now, this is probably one of the biggest recommendations. One of those I feel like has probably as big as impact as anything is what you do after. And hopefully we'll get to protein too, but the carbohydrate this is an interesting window. Is after activity, about 15 to 30 minutes, the blood flow is still focused on your muscles. And if you give food during that time, you know these carbohydrate stores we've been saying are so important? The restoration of those is double. In other words, you can put the glycogen back really, you can increase the time frame to put that glycogen back if you'll feed in this window after activity. And they typically recommend about 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram within the first 15 to 30 minutes after activity. All right, so for him, let's look at that one now. So take a 138 gram individual, get his kilograms, and then see what that works out to be as far as, I'll give you a little practice here, as far as amount of grams of carbohydrate. So I'll give you a second to run through that one. So I know this is fast, but I'm trying to give you time. Hopefully you can come away with a little bit of a skill or something you can use. So
95?
which one do you use?
Like 1.5 grams.
Use about 1.5. You like protein? There you go. There you go. That's a Marathon Snickers protein bar. Oh, I got all sorts of cool stuff in here. Oh, I do have shot blocks. Okay. Okay. Now, I think they're going to have a treat for you at the end, so I'm using this as the mode to get some of this information out, right? Is that correct? Am I on target with that? Okay, yeah. So yeah, 63 to 94-ish grams of carbohydrate. And if you look at that, a chocolate milk, 16 ounces of chocolate milk has 52. So you're not quite there, but you're pretty close. Chocolate milk's got a lot of press as far as a recovery drink, and when we hit protein, that'll kind of all fall together. But that gets you on the bottom end for Marcus there. Throw in, I don't know, a granola bar or whatever, and you're in that range. So that 15 to 30 minutes is critical. Once that's passed, that blood flow starts to go back to where it's usually at, and that capacity to restore it so quickly goes away. I push this with my son. I got a bunch of kids playing soccer. That's my life at the soccer field. But when they do the two-a-game games, so they'll go play for an hour and a half, 2 hours hard. I had one son that was playing JV and varsity at the same time. And so he'd play the whole JV game, and then you go to the varsity game and play. And by that was after 4 hours. He was really tired. But in that window between, I would try to get him something in that window right after to help with that second game. Or even if the game's like a 1 and 4, whenever that kind of thing's happening, I feel like that will really help. Totally anecdotal, but for them, they really said it made a difference for them. Anyways, I'll spare the stories. There's a bunch of those with that. All right, is that, yeah?
So what is the difference between taking the fluids after or like chewing?
That's a good question. I've heard speculations that fluid might be better because it goes quicker, but I remember reading an article here lately where they actually did that in physical food, and it didn't seem practically to make a difference. There's some interesting theory about fluid might be more rapid, but I haven't seen that substantiated, and maybe I've missed it in the literature. So I'm saying in high glycemic, but whether it be food or drink, yeah, I'm not picky yet on that. Yeah.
So you want your carbs to be simple carbs, or does it matter?
Probably at this case, they would push the high glycemic. So more of a simple, but even like potatoes, are high glycemic. Bread's high glycemic, so it doesn't have to be a sugary thing. But yes, something that's easily digested and has a lot of glucose in there. Yeah. Yeah.
An aunt of mine said that people in this day and age don't chew their food as well as they could, and so that it makes it harder for their body to digest it. So then if, I guess, during a workout, if you were to chew the food better, or lump or something, then would that help you be able to for your body to digest?
It could
absorb it better?
It could probably change the glycemic index. Whether practically it would make a difference in glycogen storage, I'm not sure. But as far as changing the glycemic index, that's probably possible on how much you choose that. So it might change the speed a little bit, but I don't know if it really practically end up in a difference. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody else? Good questions. Good questions. All right. All right, so which of these groups here would you be most interested in making sure you got a recovery drink or recovery food or recovery carbs? Someone who does low moderate exercise 1 hour a day, someone who does heavy exercise Monday, Wednesday, Friday, swimmers with a 2-hour practice, 2-hour practices a day, soccer players with 3-hour intense daily practices. Swimmers? Is that fair? That would be a really good place to apply this, and I'd pick one more probably. I'd probably pick the soccer too. Even though they're not doing 2 a day, after 3 hours, they're going to want to get it back as much as they can before the next practice the next day. That makes sense. Those would be my two I would pick that would be probably useful for. This guy I probably wouldn't, even though they're exercising hard, they've got really some good time for recovery. Usually with 24 hours, you probably can get those back. And this one, it's probably just not necessary, that one. I know Jackie Burning, who's the Denver Broncos dietitian, she did this with these swimmers. That's why I picked that. She had these little swimmers, they're high school students, that would come in and do 2 hours of hard swimming before school at 6 o'clock in the morning. And you think about that, our high school kids going to school at 6 o'clock and eat breakfast probably. Now, so they come without breakfast, they swim 2 hours hard, and then what do you think their carbohydrate stores are like? Really low. They run out of there, they don't do anything. The first meal they eat of the day is lunch, and then they come back for another swim practice from like 3 to 5. And the coach was complaining and said they were ornery, the workouts were horrible, they were tired, and she just simply got them going, having like a granola bar or something before the activity, and then had stuff for them to grab as they ran from practice. And she said it made a world of difference in their afternoon training sessions just by doing that simple thing. So I think this is a good recommendation. All right. Now, protein. All right. What time do we need to stop? Oh, we still have 15 minutes? At the 50, so we have 10 minutes. Okay. Let me just give you a couple basic protein recommendations, and then I'll stop, and if you have some questions or whatever, I'd be happy to do questions. This is the overall protein recommendation for athletes, all right? That's depending on the type of activity. Active adults, most of us are at 0.8 grams per kilogram. Endurance, they go about 1.2 to 1.4, and then strength athletes about 1.6 to 1.7. Most of what I'm seeing, and actually pretty strong, is that 2 grams per kilogram for most athletes, that's going to max it out. In other words, you're not going to get any more gain after that. You don't need to go beyond that as far as protein amounts to get any type of muscle gain that you're after, right? So for this guy right here, this breaks it down a little bit. It doesn't help much. It gives that whole range. It's a good indication of the quality or the efficiency of protein in muscle building. So, and you've heard a lot of talk about whey, right? Whey's kind of hot, and it's up on top, and that's part of the reason why. Eggs up there, milk, casein. If you're not an animal flesh kind of person or a milk kind of person, off to the side there you see quinoa and amaranth, and in the middle of it you see soy. Those are plant-based proteins that have the same quality, efficiency as a lot of these animal-based proteins. So quinoa is a great, if you're not quinoa eaters, it's probably more healthy for you in the big picture, quinoa is. So get adequate amounts and good quality. And we don't need to do that. Now, if the person is trying to cut calories, if calories aren't adequate, they say up that recommendation by 15%. So pick your recommendation and increase it if they're trying to cut calories. Because if they're trying to cut calories, extra protein helps you maintain muscle mass. So they up that. If the person's a vegan vegetarian, they say up that by 10% to make sure they're getting all the protein they need. Okay. Now, timing-wise, I'm just going to give you a couple things, then we're going to cut it. This is probably the biggest, again, the after. I'm struggling with before and during. I'm still getting mixed messages. But after, for me, seems pretty clear as far as protein after, particularly resistance exercise, is going to help gains. I feel really good with that one. And there's a nice little study done. It was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and they did a dosing response at muscle gain or muscle stimulation based on protein dose. So they went 0, 10, 20 grams, and what they saw is that about 20 grams of protein, more muscle gains, it topped off and kind of plateaued. And their message is kind of where you're seeing this in a lot of the recommendations now is that 20 grams is about adequate to maximize gains after activity. That's not a lot of protein. 3 ounces of chicken has 20 grams of protein, 3 glasses of milk. So it's not a huge amount, but they're looking at that as a really good, say this is where you're going to maximize, get at least that amount to maximize your gains there. All right, now I'm going to skip some of this since we're almost out of time. And that's where chocolate milk comes in, again, because it's got both. It's got, for a recovery drink, it's got the carbohydrate, and it also has the protein, and so that's why it's gotten such good press, I think, with that. Now, and this is timing. That's really fun, too, is about dividing your protein up during the day. I think there's some practicality with that. But this is one thing I wanted to, and those of you who've had my sports class have already seen this, so you can't answer this, but this is so common for athletes, and I wanted to leave this as a caution. This was a friend of mine that came to me, and he was struggling. He was 6'4", 220. He benched about 300, so he's pretty strong. And he got to this point where his bench wouldn't plateau. Some of you may have been to that point where you're doing all you can and it won't increase anymore. And he came and said, can you look at my diet and see what's going on? He thought he needed to add more protein. So he sat down and looked at it and went through. Look at his layout, and where's the problem?
Calories.
Who said that? Yeah, what'd you say? Say it louder.
Calories.
All right. You deserve a honey stinger lemon waffle from Lance Armstrong for that one. Okay. Yeah, his problem wasn't protein at all. His problem was calories. For a guy that's 6'4", 220 pounds and exercising hard, is 2,400 calories going to be adequate for him? So where was his protein going?
To energy.
It was to energy. Yeah, it couldn't go to the muscle gain. So we ratcheted up his calories slowly, and almost immediately his bench started going up again because his protein, we didn't need to change his protein because his protein was now going where it needed to go. But a lot of athletes are caught into that scenario. If I'm not getting muscle gains like I want, I'm going to eat more protein, right? Eat more protein. I got to get the chicken story in real quick before we go. This is my favorite story example of this. This is the Denver Broncos dietitian. This was a lineman, a professional lineman, and the coaches said you need to trim down. He had too much. Well, he wasn't a lineman. He had to be defensive back. You need to lose some muscle. You need to lose some fat, put on some muscle, and you need to get faster. He wasn't a starter, and so he went home and did what he thought he should do to do that. And he came into Jackie Burning and said, it's not working. I'm feeling terrible. I feel like sleeping in the weight room. I just can't keep up with this. And she thought he was doing this. He cut his calories too far. She said, okay, tell me what you ate. She said, well, for breakfast I had chicken. And she goes, okay, how much chicken? He goes, I had 10. He goes, 10 what? I had 10 chicken breasts nuked. So for breakfast, he'd had 10 big chicken breasts in the microwave. That was his breakfast. So she goes, all right, what'd you have for lunch? He goes, I had 15. 15 what? 15 chicken breasts nuked. So that was his whole lunch was 15 big chicken breasts. He goes, all right, what'd you have for dinner? He goes, I had 20. Yeah, she said she'd learn never to be surprised anymore with some of these things that she saw. 20 chicken breasts nuked, you got the pattern. So he'd eaten 45 fairly good-sized chicken breasts, and that was mostly what he ate that day. Can you get the feel on maybe, he wasn't low in calories. If you do the math on 45 chicken breasts, he's probably okay. What was he lacking? Yeah, he was feeling crummy. He was feeling crummy because he was probably in ketosis. He was, in a bad situation. So when you work with athletes, protein's not always the way out, right? There's some other things to look at there. Yeah. All right, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.